Good morning, friends, and welcome to New Garden Friends Meeting. It is our practice at New Garden to extend a wide and warm welcome to everyone who joins us for worship. Whether you are joining this morning on Zoom or are watching through Facebook Live, or whether you are watching the recording of this service, which is available online, welcome. I'm so glad that you are at worship with us today. You are welcome here among friends, no matter who you are and no matter where you may be on your spiritual journey. We make intentional space here at New Garden for all different kinds of people. And I am so glad that you are here with us today and worshiping with friends. I have a reading to share with you all this morning, friends. It's from the Gospel of John, chapter 2, verses 13 through 22. I'm reading this morning from the New Revised Standard Version. The Passover of the Jews was near, and Jesus went to Jerusalem. In the temple, he found people selling cattle and sheep and doves, and the money changers seated at their tables. Making a whip out of cords, he drove all of them out of the temple, both the sheep and the cattle. He poured out the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. He told those who were selling doves and others, "Take these things out of here and stop making my Father's house into a marketplace." His disciples remembered that it was written, "Zeal for your house will consume me." The Jews then said to Jesus, "What sign can you show us for doing these things?" And Jesus answered them, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." And the Jews said, "This temple has been under construction for 46 years. How will you raise it up in 3 days?" But Jesus was speaking of the temple of his body. And after he was raised from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this, and they believed the scripture and the word that Jesus had spoken. This story is one of just a few places within the Gospels where we see Jesus truly, fully angry. Throughout the Gospels, we see Jesus as a compassionate leader who draws in those who are marginalized by society and who teaches about love and mercy and justice. However, this story, even with its display of anger, is not out of character for Jesus. He rarely reacts in the way that we see within this story. But this story is ultimately about Jesus's message of justice for the world, about God's deep compassion for those who are oppressed, and about how we can order with integrity our lives. At the heart of this story is the temple, and how the temple, the sacred place for the Jews, has been made in part into a marketplace, a space that is supposed to be about equality and spiritual connection has instead become a space of economics and economic exploitation. Jesus finds this entirely abhorrent, as we can see in the text. And he overturns the tables, and he spills out the coins, and he drives out the animals from the temple, destroying property, I might add, and clearly disrupting the business of these small business owners. He is infuriated by this fall from integrity, how this space that should have been about uplifting the poor and the oppressed that should be about connecting to the divine has instead become a place where the poor suffer. It is economic injustice, as well as the making of sacred space into a business place, that is so upsetting to Jesus. Throughout Scripture, we hear a consistent message about the divine, that God is on the side of the oppressed, that God's desire for society is that we live with equality and with justice, that our society be a place of mercy. And we see in the actions of the temple that they have fallen from God's practice and God's desire for society. Perhaps most strikingly, we also see this in modern faith communities. I'm not just talking about mega church pastors with $5,000 designer sneakers, although that is, of course, incredibly immoral and abhorrent. I am also talking about the idea that faith communities should function like businesses, places where those with wealth and with means have power within the community system, and those without wealth have no power. I see so many white churches in the United States that have become so deeply concerned with how many people they have sitting in their pews that they have no energy left for loving each other or loving their neighbors. I see so many churches so concerned with maintaining their building and their institution for future generations that they have no energy left for serving their neighbors, for loving God and loving community. W. Hewlett Goller writes in the commentary on this passage in Feasting on the Words. He writes, "The temple had been taken over by buyers and sellers, consumers and marketers who knew how to fill the pews." We hear in our passage for today that the temple authorities are ultimately concerned with structure, with institution. The Jews said to him, "What sign can you show us for doing this?" And Jesus answered them, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." And the Jews said, "This temple has been under construction for 46 years, and you will raise it up in 3 days?" But Jesus was speaking of the temple of his body. Jesus is saying that the temple, the physical building, the institution, is not the center of faith. Instead, he is pointing us back toward God and towards the message of the resurrection. Jesus is pointing us towards the truth that love wins, that love has the ultimate victory over every system of oppression in our world. Jesus is reminding us that God is all about overturning oppression, undoing injustice in our world, that the physical temple that has been under construction for 46 years does not matter as much as the truth of faith. That a faith community is not defined by its building and its institution, but is instead defined by faith. I think of the early New Gardeners who worshiped outside while sitting on logs and surrounded by their horses. I think of early Quakers who were legally not allowed to build meeting houses, and so instead worshiped on street corners and in prisons and in kitchens. I am so grateful for our beautiful building that I am sitting in this morning. because I think it allows us to gather together as a community to love each other in incredible ways and to help our outside community, to aid our neighbors. It is one of the major tools that we use to be good neighbors to those around us. Before the pandemic temporarily closed our building, this building was used almost every day of the week, both during the day and in the evenings, by outside groups and organizations. We offered this space to the community to use and to support those organizations and those groups. I am so grateful to have this space, but I also know that this building is not New Garden Friends Meeting. If this building were to fall to the ground tomorrow, which thanks to our wonderful House committee, it is not going to do, but if this building were to fall to the ground tomorrow, we would still be New Garden Friends Meeting. If a time came when this community could no longer afford to have any employees, we would still be New Garden Friends Meeting. We do incredible things now with our building and with our staff, with our programming that we have, and we may not be able to do those things if that building and that structure and those employees and that system did not exist. But we would still be a community of faith. We are not defined by our structure, by our institution, by our building or our traditions. Our community is about the work that we do together to love each other and to follow the call of the Spirit. Even if all of the institutions and structures were to fall, that would continue to be true, that we are a community of faith. And this is the heart of this message. It is a message about the integrity that we have as a community. Our society teaches us to buy and consume. We live in a country of deep economic exploitation, and faith communities are not free from the influences of this system, a system that commodifies and exploits. This passage is calling us to work to disentangle ourselves from harmful systems of exploitation. It is calling us to instead live lives of integrity, to center the work of justice and mercy and love. We are called to examine how we value ourselves based on how much we produce, how we value ourselves based on our economic resources. It is also calling us to examine how we value others. How we value others based on how much they produce, based on how much wealth they have or do not have. We are called to find new ways as a faith community, ways that lift up human dignity, ways that honor that of God within every person, that honor that truth that we all have intrinsic worth. I want to be clear because I think sometimes this passage is misinterpreted to mean that faith communities should never talk about money. And that is not what we are being taught here. As a matter of fact, I think this passage teaches us that we must talk about money as a faith community. That when we do not talk about money, it creates a system of secrets and shame and guilt and secret hidden privilege. Instead, I think we need to publicly honor that every person, every single person within our community has value, and every person is capable of generosity. We need to honor the generosity of all of the many people within our communities, the ways that so many of you give so generously of your financial resources, but also of your time and energy. If we are going to create a system that values each person and their intrinsic worth, we have to value the generosity that we are all capable of. I also think that this passage is urging us not to privilege systems and institutions and traditions over the living work of the Spirit. Places matter, and traditions have value, and systems are very important for function, but ultimately, love is what matters the most. Love is the center of our life together here at New Garden Friends Meeting. That resurrection, which is a story about the victory of love, is at the center of who we are. The temple may fall, but love will remain. The institutions may fail and the systems may not function the way they are supposed to, but love will remain. Friends, as we begin to transition into our time of waiting worship, may this story trouble you, as it has been troubling me since I began to sit with it. I have been troubled by how I am complicit in systems of economic exploitation. I have been troubled by how at times I have been more invested in institutions, in systems and traditions than I have been invested in people. I have been troubled by how I am more like the money changers some days than I am like Jesus. I would like to remember and recommit to the heart of my faith, to that call to radical integrity, to that call to justice and mercy and love. And my invitation to you this morning is that you be troubled as well, and that from that experience of being troubled by this story, may you also, once again, recommit to not taking part in systems that exploit others. And may you commit and remember again that institutions may fall, but love will always remain. And that we are not defined by our building or our systems, by our traditions or institutional culture. We are instead defined by how we love each other and how we love our neighbors and how we love God.